What's up, my guys and geeks? As you know, I absolutely love Percy Jackson, and Rick Riordan has done an excellent job of building this expansive, interconnected universe where we have direct sequels to the main series like Heroes of Olympus and Trials of Apollo, and then other semi-connected series like the Kane Chronicles and Magnus Chase, where different characters interact to provide some of that connective tissue. And so today I figured I'd go through and rank all 5 Riordan-verse series from the worst to the best. If you go on to enjoy this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notifications bell for the next time I upload an awesome video. And be sure to comment down below what your ranking is of the Riordan-verse series, which is your favorite Percy Jackson series, and which is your least favorite. Now, before we get into the actual top 5 series, I want to give honorable mentions to some of the Rick Riordan Presents series that technically aren't part of the connected universe because they're written by different authors, but they're all very much located and written in a way that you can imagine that they could all be connected, but they're technically not. I've only read some of them, but the ones I have read were City of the Plague God, which was an amazing read. And then there was also Tristan Strong. His books I've just started and I'm loving it so far. And then my favorite has to be the Storm Runner trilogy and the Lords of Darkness spin-off book within that series. Those were all wonderful series, and I'm hoping one day all these Rick Riordan Presents series will somehow be incorporated into the larger Percy Jackson universe. Kicking it off in 5th place, we have Magnus Chase and the Norse gods of mythology. And I enjoy this series. It's all right. I certainly enjoy Magnus as a main character. He's fun. He's likable. I appreciate the unique aspect of having Magnus be dead for most of the series. And I love having Loki as a great main villain. And I think the interesting idea for a flighting as the final fight between the two characters is so much more interesting and unique and unexpected after we've already had quite a few of the epic final fights where everybody's using their powers all over the place. And I also appreciate that Magnus, while he does have like super strength and super stamina and super durability, since he's part of Valhalla's warriors, I appreciate that he's a lot less of a combat-oriented character, that his powers are a lot more healing and disarming based. I think he does have a good ensemble around him, especially Samira and Hearthstone and Blitzen. I really enjoy those characters. But just this series, first it's 3 books compared to a lot of the other series have 5 books, which does mean we don't get as much time with these characters. I also wasn't as big of a fan of first the character of Alex, Magnus's love interest. I really didn't like that character as much. They were just too cocky and overconfident for me. And then I just didn't feel like we got enough time with the whole Hotel Valhalla side of Magnus's life. I feel like he spent so much time out on adventures that I didn't feel as connected to his bunkmates, his hallmates, sorry, and the rest of the people back at Hotel Valhalla as I felt I could have been. Although I do really love my shout out moment has to go to in the first book when Magnus is facing Sir on the fire bridge and they're fighting and then Magnus dies. It's just such a shocking moment because you really didn't expect the main character to die like not even 100 pages into the first book of their series. So that was a really interesting take on it. But next up in 4th place, we've got the Trials of Apollo series. And I have to say, while this is an amazing series, Apollo just as a main character doesn't do it for me. Apollo is a great main character, and his character arc may be one of my favorite character arcs. But I feel like his personality just didn't capture me or make me laugh or enjoy myself the same way even Magnus or especially like Percy or the Canes, the way their personalities and their relationships with the people around them, I didn't feel as much of an emotional connection to Apollo. And then Meg, for me, as kind of the side character slash other protagonist, really never did it for me. I didn't like her as a character very much. She was very annoying to me, and I don't know. I just it was a very the two of them weren't the most likable protagonists that I could have had. I did appreciate getting to see all these other characters return: Leo, Calypso, Piper. I really appreciated Jason's death scene. I thought that was poignant, and they really fleshed out his character, made him be a lot more of a character than I felt like he was in the Heroes of Olympus. Made us really understand him and how he thinks and how he relates to people around him and his thought process a lot more than I felt like we got in the Heroes of Olympus. But just, and then the main villains of the Emperors, I guess they were interesting, but I felt like we didn't get as much time. Because there was three of them, it was a little too scattershot for me. Because I know each book in the other series usually has a specific main villain in addition to like the background main villain. But in this series, kind of like the background main villains were also our overall main villains for each book, in which case I felt like I didn't really enjoy having these emperors, because they had to establish it where the emperors were kind of like there was a hierarchy. You could tell Commodus was less dangerous than Caligula, who was less dangerous than Nero. So I felt like it didn't make the emperors as believable as big bats. I don't believe that these three guys orchestrated and funded all of Luke's adventures in the original series and all of the stuff going on with Gaia and Octavian in the Heroes of Olympus. I don't believe that they are these masterminds behind the scenes that they are made out to be, just because we we see them blunder and mess up and fail to defeat our heroes so much, as opposed to being the masterminds and have it being their minions missteps that actually cause the heroes to be able to escape. All right, next up in third place, we have the Kane Chronicles. And this one I really appreciate. It's interesting that these are like audio recordings of them. So you've got one Kane sibling giving the recording, giving the background, and the other one uh, jumping in at certain moments to make statements or make quips or different little things. It provides an interesting setup for the series. And then I really appreciate these characters. I appreciate the sibling dynamic, which is something we didn't really get in any of the other series. And a sibling dynamic is different from just like friends. So you really are able to feel the differentness of their relationship. And I appreciate it's only 3 books, but I think for this series that worked to its advantage. Whereas I felt like we should have expanded more on the Magnus Chase universe. I feel like this one was crafted with more of a tight story, so that it was a very much plot driven going forward story, but you also were able to get these huge character moments in there because there was a lot less plot and a lot more focus on the characters and their motivations and their mentalities and getting to know them and appreciate their relationships with the people around them. So I just thought it did a really excellent job at pulling that off. All right, before I get into my top 2 Riordan verse series, be sure to join me in the comments down below. Let me know which series is your favorite, which is your least favorite, and where the other ones fall in between. But in second place for me, and these two are almost interchangeable depending on the day you ask me, but in second place for me is going to be the Heroes of Olympus. And I want to say, I think House of Hades as a book by itself is better than most of the books in the original series. But I feel like overall as a series, this one isn't as strong as the original series. And a lot of that, first of all, the final fight is very underwhelming, even though we're building up to it all throughout the book, especially with Leo doing his own thing behind the scenes. I just don't feel like the final fight was as climactic or as impactful or as epic as it should have been. And then also, I felt like even though we got to see each character from their perspective, I felt like we didn't get to know them all as much as I would have liked to. I did a ranking of all the heroes of Olympus by their page time full video by clicking the card. But a lot of the characters who didn't have as much page time, like Frank and Hazel and Jason, I felt like I didn't get to know them and connect with them and like them as much as I did returning characters like Percy and Annabeth, who we already knew and who had already been established. So I just feel like we didn't flesh out these characters as much. They had huge, rich backstories, but I felt like I didn't get to feel like I knew them as much as with the original series, even though this is a beautifully written series. But of course, in first place, we've got to have the original Percy Jackson and the Olympians set.
This is Percy Jackson.
It's just amazing getting to be introduced to this world from the viewpoint of Percy, getting to see him grow in his powers and train and battle all these enemies, getting to have Luke as this wonderful, complex villain whose backstory and his relationship with the main characters and the way he was their friend, not just pretending to be, but genuinely was their friend for a time. Just that provides such an interesting dynamic. And then you've got Kronos as the background villain pulling at the strings, and you see how even he's manipulating and just straight up using Luke to achieve his end goal. And he's so menacing and terrifying and threatening that even when Percy has literally dipped in the river Styx, when he's literally invincible, you still don't think that he's going to be enough to defeat Kronos and his horde just because of the amount of menace and threatening nature that you have from Kronos. And then of course this has probably the best side character ensemble with Clarice and Tyson and Grover and Chiron. All these characters that really I connected with so much more than some of the other side characters in the later series. You take Nico D'Angelo and turn him from like this little kid who just like pops up in the third book to by the time the fifth book is there, you really like feel like you've gotten to know him as a character. And I feel like we got to know all these side characters and they fleshed out the world in a much more impactful way than any of the later series were ever able to do. But alright, that's my ranking of all 5 Riordanverse series. Be sure to give me your ranking in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit that notifications bell for the next time I upload an awesome video. And if you want to see me talk about the 10 characters I need to see in James Gunn's new DCU, you can click on this side of the screen. And if you want to see me rank all the Olympian gods from the worst to the best, you can click on this side of the screen. But you only got 3 seconds because this video is about to end. Adios!